went walking through icy streams that took my breath away, moving slowly through westward water, over glacial plains. And I walked off you, and I walked off an old me. Oh me, oh my, I thought it was a dream, so it seems. And now breathe deep, I'm inhaling you and others are in between. Leave me be, I'm exhaling you and others are in between. Ooh, 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 ooh. You and others are in between. Ooh, 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 ooh. Cut my hair so I could walk back and forth without thinking of you. Learn to talk and say whatever I wanted to. And I walked off you, and I walked off an old me. Oh me, oh my, I thought it was a dream, so it seems. And now breathe deep, I'm inhaling you and others are in between. Leave me be, I'm exhaling you and others are in between. Ooh, 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 ooh. You and others are in between. Ooh, 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 ooh. You and others are in between. Ooh, 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 ooh. You and others are in between.
Chamai, Qana Dailuchi, Winga Aka Robin Cheney, Churio Communa, Drasvitui, Menyazavut Robin Cheney, Piatno Poznak Mitsya. Good morning from Alaska, which is good evening to you in Moscow. We're so happy to be here. I'm Robin Cheney. I'm from Dillingham, Alaska, and I'm joined by my friend Taylor Bacher. And this is our first beautiful welcome to the great state of Alaska. I am very excited to be here. I've never been to Moscow, and I hope that we have a good conversation today as we share about my home state, my homeland, Alaska. And I think my friend is having some technical difficulties, so she might leave and then join again. But this is what I see just behind where I live. I'm on in the coast, the southwest coast of Alaska, in Bristol Bay. If you love salmon, you would love Bristol Bay. It is home to the last great wild sockeye salmon run in the world. I'll start with myself. We're hoping to tell you about Alaska and help you learn about our home by introducing ourselves and telling you about us. So again, Winga Atka Robin Cheney, Minyazavut Robin Cheney. I'm a mom. I have 6 children. 4 are grown, 2 are still in school, and I work at our school. I started my life as a scientist. I'm also a tribal court judge for my home tribe. In Alaska, as we'll see, it has a very long political history of ownership, but a very long history of its first peoples, of which I am one. I am Churyong. I'm from Churyong, my homeland. I was raised Yupik. We are coastal natives. I'm also Athabascan, which are interior Indians. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you about my home and about my people. And I think Taylor was able to join us. Hopefully she can hear us and she can tell us a little bit about herself.
Hello, I think you guys can hear me because now I can hear you, which is fantastic. My name's Taylor O'Donnell Bacher. I'm a mom. I live in Homer, Alaska, and previous to this, I was a wrestler. I went to the Olympics in 2004. I spent a lot of time doing advocacy for girls wrestling, for people with disabilities, and I did a TEDx talk a while ago, but really like what I enjoy and why I'm really excited to do this presentation today with Robin is that when you connect people throughout the world or through different, just when you connect with people who have a different life experience with you, there's so much that we find that we have in common or we can learn from each other. And that was one of the reasons I was really excited to this talk with Robin today, is because I think maybe both of our superpowers are engaging with people, making connections, and that's really what these presentations are about. So I'll hand it back to you if we're in the right spot. You can talk a little bit more about your who you are.
So again, I'm Chilhyungmut. The traditional place name of where I live is Chilhyung. Alaska, again, as we'll see, has gone through different political ownership. But the beautiful thing for me is that my people have always been here. I'm very fortunate to have been here in what I think is the most beautiful place in the world, to have grown up here, and to have a long ancestry here, and to have had culture bearers in my family that have shared knowledge about our lands, that have shared knowledge about our language, and that have shared knowledge about our environment. And having done that and grown up in this family and on this land, it's a different belief about land, where we don't necessarily feel that we own the land. We feel that we are part parcel and that we belong to this land. Fast forward to the modern day where there is land ownership. Alaska is a little bit different than the rest of the country, in that we are the 49th state. We came into statehood later, which meant that our indigenous peoples came into colonization later and negotiated to remain on our lands. In the rest of America, you might have heard there are things called reservations. We do have one in Alaska, but by and large, indigenous people were able to remain on their homelands, to have some rights to the land and waters. And so again, I'm fortunate not everybody lives on their homeland, but I am and I do. And this is a little snapshot of me and my life. Our people we still live a subsistence lifestyle. So myself, my husband, and my children, and our parents spend a lot of time harvesting off of our land, but also being stewards of our land. So fish really is a cornerstone of our life, again, of salmon. So this is a photo of me in the summer. Our family catches between 200 and 300 salmon to preserve for the winter to eat. We, again, have just miles and miles of land. And so we harvest our own wood. And like some parts of Russia, I feel like, we'll see a map. We're very close in climate. It can be really cold. Today is the second day that we've had weather above zero. Yesterday was the first day we had weather above freezing in about 2 months. So the bottom right picture is kind of what it looks like in that beautiful Alaska wintertime. I also have a background in wrestling like Taylor. That is really what joined us together. I've been a youth wrestling coach, an administrator, and under duress an official. I'm also Orthodox. We are in the southwest coast of Alaska, and so those were the first outside people that we saw, were people that came from Russia, Russian priests and people that came from fur. So to those of you that are celebrating Pascha now, we're doing the same here. So that's a little bit about me and where I'm from. A little bit about our culture and where I live here. We are very much defined, honestly, by what we eat. We spend so much time harvesting, so you'll see huckleberries, and we're very seasonal. And I think my faith and how we harvest really go hand in hand. It's very cyclical in that we go from feast to feast. So we harvest everything from migratory bird eggs. And there are laws. So, and please, if you have questions, we'd love to see them in the chat that we can answer later as we go through. But Indigenous people are allowed in America and Alaska to harvest some marine mammals. So we do eat some whale, you'll see in the bottom left. We harvest migratory bird eggs. Those are mer eggs. And we eat or use almost every part of what we catch. So it was a little bit hard for me to find appropriate hunting and trapping photos. So I really just kept it to berries and fish and birds. But moose and caribou are a big part of our diet. And my older sons trap and hunt in the winter. And so we wear a lot of furs. We eat a lot of those meats and fishes. So it takes up a lot of our time. But our cultural economy is really one of reciprocity. So we hunt, we share, we receive, and wealth in my community, in my family especially. Well, again, we are modern people living in a modern world, and I'm at a work where I work for wages. Our family economy, our community wealth is measured really not in how much we have or how much money we have, but in the resources that we can share. So I feel like I come from a very wealthy family. I have a lot of children. We work really hard to harvest and store, but we care for our elders. We share with our community, with our family and friends. And so I feel very wealthy that way in my culture and in our lifestyle. Top right wrestling. So in a good wrestling question, maybe we'll get to that. But I'll let Taylor tell you a little bit about herself, and then hopefully someone can prompt us to get back to the slides. Oh, but Russian. So I will answer this question. Do I study Russian? So when I was young, I did. But again, I am Orthodox. And so for those of you that are familiar, if you were to come to our church, I'm going to go back a slide. This is my church, St. Seraphim of Seraph in Dillingham. Our services are still done primarily in Slavonic. Their parts are in English, parts are in Russian, parts are in Greek, and then also in Yukhtun and Alutik, which are our indigenous languages. And I will say that is one thing that I love about, if we were to be colonized and have brought religion to us, that the Orthodox priests never forced us to give up our language, which is really problematic here in Alaska and other parts of our country. So again, I did my best. I apologize if I really did not do well with my Russian, but I really think it's important to try. So girls do freestyle wrestling, but a lot at the high school level. Our season here in Alaska is folk style. Right now we are in freestyle season, and we will have freestyle state in May. So, and I think I know that wrestling is really popular in Russia too. So Taylor and I are really proud to be knowledgeable about that. So thank you. Please ask questions. We hope this to be really engaging and to tell you what you want to know about Alaska.
I really love hearing about Robin's experience and her family and cultures, because there's overlap with how I grew up here, also grew up here in Alaska. However, like with a different lens. And so I would say like my roots are very pioneering. And I think kind of the reason why we wanted to share a bit about who we are is like, this is the Alaska that we know and we experience. And so it's the lens that we're viewing from. So you get a couple different perspectives here, which is pretty cool today. I grew up here in Alaska. My mom moved up here. She studied theater and mime. She's an artist, and the Homer community where I grew up has a strong um, art influence. And so she came up here and fell in love with that pioneering spirit of that kind of homesteading style uh, where you have what you build with your hands. And so she took a class on how to build a table, a woodworking class, and then she got a chainsaw and built a house. Um, I'm her only child. She's a single mom. And so a lot of my life growing up was living in the woods, figuring out how to um, eat and live. We had gardens. We're more southern than Dillingham, or I mean, a little bit more southern. And so uh, we have relatively rich soil here. In the summer, we can do gardens. I didn't grow up doing a lot of hunting. We raised sheep, and we raise sheep now. If they get hungry, you're gonna hear them bang really loudly right outside my door, because that's how they let me know they're hungry again. Um, and I just grew up living in the woods. We're a coastal community, again, like Robin. I didn't grow up doing a lot of fishing, though my dad's side of the family, they grew up fishing for crab, fishing for salmon. And I grew up living in the woods. I had so couple pictures up here in the top right. Community is really big for everybody, right? Alaska's winters are long, and even though that independence and that pioneering spirit is a big part of who everybody is, finding your community and finding those connections make a big difference in life. And it's why I chose to raise my kids here as well, because of the nature, because of the beauty, because of the like pristine environment, but also because of the community. And those group of girls right there are still my friends, neighbors today. And then again, that pioneering spirit, that horse down there, his name was Wingo. When I was around 10 years old, so like around that picture time up there at the top, um, even though we didn't have a lot of money, um, my mom figured out how to allow me to get a horse. And we used our permanent fund dividend for that. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And I grew up riding horses, riding that horse. And then that photo is me when I came back up here. I moved back up here with my son, and I have 3 kids. And they got to ride the same horse, and we got to explore nature and the world horseback for a long time. That pioneering spirit also probably was one of the reasons that I got into wrestling. When we started wrestling, Robin and it was mostly wrestling was a boy sport, and we were allowed or not allowed to join wrestling, depending on the environment they were in. When I started wrestling, when I was young, they almost didn't let me wrestle because they're like, you know what, it doesn't seem like a girl's sport. And so I was able to write a letter to the school board and ask them if I could please wrestle. And then I was like, and there's this law, it's called Title IX. And so Title IX is a federal law that allows equal opportunity for people who receive, or for organizations. So for anybody who receives government organization or government funding needs to give equal opportunity to girls and boys. And so using that law, I was able to wrestle in middle school. I wrestled throughout high school into college. I think when Robin went to school there, you probably didn't have any opportunity for women's wrestling in college, unless you were joining a boys team, which I'm quite certain that she did. And so when I went to college, it was a handful. There was 4 colleges I could choose from. I went to one of those colleges, and then was able to start training for the Olympics, because in 2004 or in 2002, they introduced women's wrestling into the Olympics. And that was my life for a really long time, focusing on, being like being on that first wave of that international opportunity of women's wrestling. And a lot of that making your own way came from the way I grew up, figuring out, oh, we need a house to live. Let's build that. Here's some logs. Here's a chainsaw. We'll go to the next slide.
I'll interject a fact, Taylor. Where was the first women's, like 4-time women's champ, the first girl in high school to win a state championship in the boys division?
From Alaska. Alaska has a lot of firsts. So again, women's wrestling was slow to be accepted in the United States, but Alaska was on the crest of that wave, because I think that values that we have in Alaska are people who do the things, right? And so if you're doing the things, no matter who you are, if you're building a house or you're going out there on the mat and you're wrestling people, no excuses, just going out and wrestling. I think that that's what we value, people who do the things. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Alaska was one of the earlier states to accept women's wrestling. And it shows in a lot of the history that we've had of firsts.
Our informal motto for Alaska is Alaska, where men are men and women win the Iditarod. So we just had the Iditarod. If you're interested, it's a annual dog sled race across Alaska, and we've had many women win. And I think that's one thing I love about Alaska. Like Taylor said, the independence, that spirit, it's so vast. But there's not a lot of people, and so we have to rely on each other, and respect is given to those who work hard and survive. In order to survive, we need each other, but you also have to be strong. And so that's something, a value that Alaskans definitely admire and respect.
100%. And so after Alaska, and through wrestling, I had an opportunity to see different parts of the world. Right here, that top left is the opening ceremonies at the 2004 Olympic Games. That was the first year that they had women's wrestling in the Olympics. I got to wrestle a Russian woman at the Olympics. That was pretty cool. We had tough matches. I wrestled her also in Russia, in Krasnoyarsk, a few years ago, or a year before that. And through wrestling, you start to get exposed to cultures outside of our own Alaskan culture or U.S. culture, and that that part of wrestling really inspired me beyond the mat. So after I retired from wrestling, I was able to join an organization, or I was one of the founding board members of an organization called Wrestle Like a Girl, who worked really hard to develop and promote women's wrestling, and give opportunity where there wasn't, and advocate for equal opportunity for girls and boys through wrestling. And we were able to be really successful in that development and growth of that because of where we were, because society was open for it. No matter what your background is, like people like the idea of being empowered through wrestling and empowering young women as well as young men. And through that, I got connected with sports diplomacy and looking at how sport is used to address social issues and to develop and connect. And so through that, we were able to first participate in and then start leading these international sports diplomacy exchanges. I got to go to Mongolia and Pakistan, and then we were also doing camps around the country. And one of the camps that we did was in Dillingham, Alaska. You can see some of those pictures there. And that's where I connected with Robin. And I was like, man, this woman is fantastic. She's smart. She's educated. She cares deeply about her community, and she just can make things happen. And so we were able to connect, and Robin came on an exchange that we had in Azerbaijan in 2024, right? And so that's kind of how I got to know Robin. And so once this opportunity came along, I was like, okay, I have one experience of Alaska, but for sure, we have to bring Robin on board to share her, her information and education about Alaska. And here we go.
So we should teach you some Alaska basics. And again, please ask questions. So we're answering your questions and telling you the things you want to know about Alaska. But it is known as the last frontier. Our state motto is North to the Future. And for the next 15 minutes or so, we hope to tell you where it is. Is it really the biggest state? Who lives here? You got to know me a little bit. What happens here? What do kids do? I can tell you a lot about that. And you're going to hear through the whole time that we're with you is why we love it here. And Taylor did share about why she's here and continues to stay here. So if there are questions or if there's things you want to know about the state, there is no question too silly or for us to answer. So Alaska, I hope you know, we're actually very close. If this were a better world map, you'd see just how close we are to Russia. But we are the most northerly state. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, there we are. And we have, the two islands, Little Diomede and Big Diomede, that are just across the waters from each other. So we're very close. And we are also the largest state by area. We are twice the size of Texas. So I don't know if you've had any guests from Texas, but don't let them fool you. Alaska is bigger. We also have the most coastline. So other than that very straight line on the west side, that it's mostly coastline. It's so beautiful. And we have a question like, do you feel somewhat disconnected from the world? And if yes, do you enjoy it? Yes, I do. It's so wild and so beautiful. We do have a road system. There are bigger cities. Taylor and I don't live in those places, but we do go to those places. If you live in rural Russia, or if you've been to rural Russia, you might have experienced some of the same things. Things take a very long time to get here. They're very expensive, and I'm okay if that's the price to pay to live out here in a very natural land. It's dangerous and safe. The lands are wild, but I feel very supported and safe. So I do enjoy living out here. I don't love sometimes how long it takes things to get here. In the winter, sometimes it's hard to get food. If you can see, if we're eating commercial food, we do have stores here. They have to come from we call it the lower 48. So things can take a very long time to get here. A truck can drive from Seattle through Canada to Anchorage. You can drive to Homer, where Taylor lives. I'm the Western Star. Taylor is the Eastern Star. The only way to get to Dillingham is by boat or plane. You probably technically could snow machine here in the winter, but it would take a very long time. It would be dangerous. It's been done. So this is where we are. And you can see just to our west is Russia. So we are your neighbors. And again, you could research us a little bit, but again, our indigenous people have always been here, but we did go through a period of being colonized by Russia. There was a very robust fur trade, which really impacted coastal indigenous people. The first capital was in the east, in Sitka. And then it's called Seward's Folly when the U.S. bought Alaska. I think it was for 17 cents an acre. Is that, I don't know. Someone you might have to fact check me on that. And then gold was discovered, and there was a gold rush, and a lot of people came up to Alaska. We became a territory of the United States in 1912 and officially became a state and joined the Union in 1959. And we are the 49th state. I know some of you have gotten to travel to Hawaii through this program, and we share some similarities with them, not in climate at all, but in remoteness. And again, being a later colonized state, a very strong indigenous population with very strong indigenous roots. So that's some of our history If you're interested in any of those things, I'm sure you could find more information online. Again, being an educator, I feel like I have to tell you some of our basic facts, and some of them I think are really interesting. This is our state flag. It was adopted in 1927. Our state flower is the forget-me-not, so that's where the blue comes from. And the Big Dipper and the North Star. One thing that I really love about this is that their flag is very simple. It's not overly complicated. And it was designed by a native boy who is Aleut. His name is Benny Benson. He had to leave his home and go to a residential school. There is a whole saga behind residential schools and displacement for Indigenous people, and having to go to boarding schools. And again, if that's something that you're interested in, I encourage you to learn more about that and its impact on our communities. So our state flag was designed by a 13-year-old Alutiiq boy named Benny Benson. And something I care very much about is that original picture of Alaska. And so these are the generalized regions of our Indigenous people. Our coastal people are Inupiaq, Yupik, Chupik, Unanging, Alutiiq, Siuxpiaq. So on the northern coast, so our northernmost town is Utqiagvik, and probably, again, very similar to the northern parts of Moscow. It's very, very cold in the winter. It's very, very dark in the winter. There's a time on the northern part of Alaska where the sun sets and they experience the dark of winter until spring when the sun comes up again. Again, I have some mixed ancestry. I'm Athabascan. So my family comes from parts of the interior on the Yukon River, which is the biggest river in our state. But I grew up in Southwest as a Yupik person and a Yukhtun speaking person. So that's our cultural heritage in Alaska. And of course, people move all over and have intermarried, but those are the general regions for Indigenous people. And we are still here. Native people aren't something from the past. There definitely are traditional practices that we've carried forward. We still, endeavor to speak our native languages and our heritage languages. And I'm hoping that someone can share a video that demonstrates how we are both traditional people and modern people. So this is by some Yukhtun people. They're Bamyo. They've taken traditional.
Yalihalo, Yalihalo, Damalo, Yalihalo, Pagahun, Pahun, Rahun, to Akulihun, to Halachumi, the Maxoluni, hey, 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 the Maxoluni, hey, hey, hey.
So without having to use words or explanations, I love that song and that music video because it shows you both of those things together. You see people in gamuksuks and parkas, using our traditional furs, but also, modern Alaska where we have high-tech outdoor gear. In rural areas, gas is very expensive and our villages are small. So a lot of people there's still some dog teams up north, but people get around on snow machines and Hondas on like four-wheel ATVs. And to get to our smaller villages, you got to see some of the small airplanes that were in the ones that we used to travel are maybe 6 passengers. So our students, when they go to play basketball games, we are, as we saw on the map, we're an isolated community. There's no roads. So our teams have to fly, and they fly in those small airplanes to get to other villages or to get to bigger towns to play. So that's Bumya. If you have, again, on the internet, if you want to see some more, they're really fun. But to me, that's a really good snapshot of our traditional people, our language. But we are still here. There's still a lot of Indigenous people here. So that's Bumya. And then Taylor's going to share a little bit about Alaska.
Yeah. So like our like modern day industries, like the biggest one that we have here is oil and gas. And we have a lot of natural resources, which are the resources that fund our state, that put a lot of food on the table for families. And so the North Slope borough has a lot of drilling. And so I would say many families might have one parent that goes up 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off and works up on the North Slope on the oil rigs. Maybe they work in transportation, or they work like on the rig, or they work in construction. And there's many different jobs up there that sustain families. We also have mining as well. We have many natural resources. Gold was discovered early on, copper, and then we have other minerals that are pretty valuable to those who are extracting them. And they, I'd say we talk a little bit more about the interaction between some of our other natural resources as well. But I would say, yep, there we go. So go for it.
Thanks. So this is what our family does. And back to those, we have non-renewable resources in Alaska, the oil, the gold, you'll hear molybdenum, things like that. And so it's a balance in Alaska. We are big, but our waterways, our animals, and our people are so connected. You can't do something in one location and not have it have trickle-down effects. So it's a constant mostly healthy battle of balancing extraction and accessing those non-renewable resources with preserving and protecting our renewable resources. Someone had a good question about mining for gold. So Nome is where kind of that gold, the home of that gold rush. So there are places in public areas you can go and mine on a small scale. You can mine in other areas in Alaska. I forget what that's called when it's a little flakes, but yeah, there are some places that you can go, and we'll talk about tourism in just a minute. I know we're getting shorter on time, but there are places that you can do that. And there are still large scale mining operations. There are still family scale. There's a lot of small business in Alaska and family businesses, which is what our family does. So I grew up in Alaska. We call it kind of the 3 different modes of fishing. My primary one is subsistence. our family, like on the bottom left, the left slides, we go and we harvest salmon for our own personal use. If you're a resident of Alaska, you can harvest and dry those fish, smoke those fish, freeze those fish, salt those fish. So that's where we spend a lot of energy in the summer. There's also a very robust commercial fishery, particularly on the southern coast. And again, Bristol Bay is home to the last great wild sockeye salmon fishery. So those are actually my sons on the top right, on the Robin Darlene and Bristol Bay. It's a limited entry fishery, and it's very, very large scale. Just for perspective, gosh, it's been almost 10 years, but in the last 10 years, there was a record harvest on a single day. 1 million fish were harvested in our bay. So constitutionally, our salmon, our renewable resources are protected in the Constitution. That is how much the state values those resources. So again, there's still a healthy battle. In the last one, we'll talk about some fun facts about Alaska. One of them is a permanent fund, and that, we were given that opportunity because of the oil industry. But especially now, resources, non-renewable resources, especially being more limited, there's just going to be a constant back and forth about protecting waters versus extraction. So that is something that's very, very special about Alaska and really beautiful. And lots of people pay lots of money to come out here to do the last form of fishing, which is sport fish, which was kind of foreign to me growing up. But my oldest son he helps us put up fish. We do our subsistence. He goes out, he owns a boat and a permit. Both of my sons do, and they commercial fish. In Alaska is in the summer, it's that short duration. We get a lot of our produce, we plant, we garden, it's sun all the time. We do so much intense work in the summer. And that's one of those industries. They can make sometimes a year's worth of income in a short season, sometimes not. It's kind of volatile. And then after that, some of them are sport fish guides. And so they'll bring clients out to fish for rainbows and grayling and salmon and then move into the winter. So this economy of salmon is also very, very important in Alaska.
And it touches many different people's lives. So my husband also fished in Bristol Bay for a few years. He would travel over the, just over the mountains to Bristol Bay, and that's where we sustained our family for a while. Previous to that, he was a charter boat captain. Again, like if you're in coastal communities, fishing industry is part of your way of life, and subsistence fishing is also as well. I'd say it's some of the things that make you feel very rich. Like Robin talked about earlier, like you're like, okay, we can go and we can find the food that we need around us, whether it's berries, fishing, and then tourism, right? That fishing part is a big part of tourism, but we have so many natural wonders here. We have bear viewing, wildlife viewing. You can't drive down. So again, we're on the road system. We do a lot of driving. You can't drive down the road without keeping an eye out for moose who will cross the road. And if they run into your car, it's a big deal for the moose and for the people driving. Again, I told you we raise sheep. We have nature around us. There's coyotes singing in the woods every night. We have 3 dogs, but last year one of our sheep did get eaten by a bear. So we got part of our sheep, we got the rest. That last frontier kind of idea and vision is really what brings a lot of people up to Alaska. They get excited about living close to the land and being a part of that pristine beauty. You can hike, you can kayak, you can fish, you can see the northern lights, you can go bear viewing, and then if you're lucky, you can get connected to the rich culture that Alaska has as well. Yeah.
No, so we'll move to
fun facts about Alaska.
And then we'll do some questions.
Yes. So, I mean, when we talked about economy, like oil is a big economy and it brings a lot of money to our state that our state uses and disperses throughout Alaska. But the medical field is also one of the bigger employers in Alaska as well as education, because whereas there's a lot of oil, like people who are involved in oil, who work in oil, who live in the lower 48 and then come up here for their 2 weeks and then they go down and they don't live in Alaska. When you're in the medical field, you live in Alaska and that's what you're doing. And so that's a new field for me. I recently got into and recognizing the impact and the industry that it is pretty interesting, because it's sometimes actually hard to find work that sustains your family financially, and medical is a big part of that industry. Depending on where you live, we might have agriculture. We have some of the biggest cabbages and biggest pumpkins in the world because of our long daylight in the summer. And so up around Anchorage and the Matsu Valley, South Central, that's where you get these huge plants that get to just eat up the sun and grow to be 1,000 pounds and more. It's pretty cool. And then our permanent fund dividend is currently around $1,000 that we get every year, and it's set up as oil revenue fund that goes back to Alaskans. Robin might know a little bit more in depth about it, but it's something that Alaskans value all the time. We're always trying to figure out how people can keep their permanent fund dividend, because it's a redistribution of wealth to people who often really need those funds for their life. Whereas on the other hand, we don't have any state taxes in terms of taxes on goods or taxes on income. So it's an interesting way that we fund our state, and that we people are able to live here and sustain themselves.
Yeah, I agree. There's some things, the one upside of being a later blossoming state is we've got to learn from those who have come before us, and have elders and founders of our state that really care about future generations. Another resource and value that we hold really highly in our state and our Indigenous communities are our youth and our children. And so I'm very appreciative of past leaders and current leaders that have that eye on the future, understanding that a lot of Alaska is rural and is not accessible by road. And, politicians don't always make the right choices about money, but some of them, so the permanent fund are those funds that were held in trust for future generations that we're still benefiting from. Another interesting fact about Alaska is some of these areas have dual jurisdictions. So the state of Alaska is again, if we can bring your mind back to those indigenous regions, there was something that happened called INCSA when they were figuring out what to do with Native people in their land. We are divided up into different tribal regions and into many, many different tribes. And so, as I mentioned before, I'm also a tribal court judge. I live in the city of Dillingham, Alaska, which holds concurrent jurisdiction with the native village of Chuljeong. And so while our tribe does have a court, we have a tribal council. And so there are times as an Indigenous person, we have, mostly I hear family law in cases involving children in need of aid. And it has to be one or the other. A case either has to be in the jurisdiction of the state of Alaska or in the jurisdiction of the Chuljeong tribe. And so that's also something else it's simple and complicated. Another interesting thing about Alaska, and also in the rest of America, a lot of those things happen on reservations where tribes have jurisdiction over their reservation. In Alaska, it's very overlapped. Again, we only have the one reservation where the Indigenous people own their land outright. So there's lots of interesting and complicated land ownership issues in Alaska that are between the government and with our tribal governments. But before we do, I know we have a short time. I want to make sure we answer all of your questions. There was one about languages. How similar or different are the language of Indigenous people in Alaska? And I'm going to go back. Sorry, I hope I don't make you dizzy. To that map. So the coastal people generally speak different dialects of like Inupiat or Yupik. From where I am down in the southwest to up north, there are definitely some different words, but they're all kind of those Inuit languages. From me south and coastally, they're Unangan, Alutiiq. And if you were here and you heard some of our Indigenous words, you'd be like, hey, I recognize some of those words. Some of our, just like all languages do and all peoples do, there's a little bit of melding. So some of our words definitely have Russian bases for things that were introduced to us by Russians that came here. Different words for beads and pots and pans and teas and coffees were very influenced by Russian language. And so the languages, I would say, are very similar for the Northwest and Western coast. They start getting a little different out on the chain, out on that big hook that goes out. Interior Athabascan or Indian languages, they have more in common with like the Diné and Navajo peoples. And if you get to visit New Mexico, you'll hear about them. And then those southeast coastal languages are kind of a cluster, the Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, and Eyak. And that extends down into Canada, into like northern Washington, into coastal people. So those groupings are kind of our language families. That's a good question. And books and videos. I hope you are very intrigued by Alaska. I hope this short little visit with you left you with more questions that fortunately with the internet, hopefully you can find answers to in videos. Our family was featured in a film called The School of Fish. If you really want to learn more about fishing and our ancestry and the impact, kind of where those two things collide, development and renewable resources, that's a nice short film to watch. And lots of good books. I would encourage you to seek out books by Indigenous authors. There's some really good ones if you really want like an authentic voice behind them. And then just a lot of my passion is for children. And again, I've been a youth coach and an educator for many years. And probably similar to, just Russia is also very, very big. People in the north, you're experiencing our similar climate. People in the south, it might be warmer. But just like our adults, our Alaskan kids are really tough. They participate in all of the industries that you see, that we've shared with you from a young age. We're just kind of heading into spring, but it's been very cold here for the last couple of months. And we have recess. Our rule here locally is kids go outside for their recess unless the weather is 20 below or colder. So there's oops, I wrote 40 below. That's inaccurate. That was a typo. It's recess at 20 below. So our kids go out in all kinds of weather, like I'm sure they probably do there. And how do people's perceptions of Alaska differ from the reality of living there? Kind of like Russia, we're so big, it's hard to characterize it all the same. But I think Taylor describes the people that live here really well. But I would also say, thanks to modern technology, we're able to see more authentic versions of people that live in Alaska. There's always a joke that we always get asked if we still live in igloos. You know what? Those are a real thing. Our northern people did use those to live in and survive. Down here, they looked a little bit different. They're in sod huts. We don't live in those anymore, but we endeavor to preserve that knowledge. But what would you say to that question, Taylor?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that too. Like food can be expensive here in Alaska. I'd say like where I am, it's like similar to California prices. Where you are, maybe a little bit more because the cost of getting food to you is a little bit higher.
It's not cold all the time and it's not dark all the time.
Yeah.
But I would say there's still those extremes in the winter. it kind of is dark all the time. I come to work in the dark and I go home in the dark. In the summer, it's light all the time. 9 o'clock is like 4 o'clock. And there's a time around the solstice where if the weather is good, if it's clear, it doesn't really get dark. It gets a little twilight, maybe around 2, maybe to 4 or 4:30, and then it gets bright again. The weather is still harsh. Like, it doesn't matter how many snow machines or one thing that I would say the perception is accurate is, like the previous question, that we're isolated. We still have to respect the land. We still have to respect the weather. Our schools close when it's very, very cold. We do have a rule: our kids can't travel if it's 30 below or colder. School is generally closed if it's 50 below or colder, because just the oil gets too thick. And so it is 2026, but we still have to abide by the laws of nature. And sometimes nature tells us what we are or aren't doing.
Yeah. And I'd say, like, where I live, it's southern Alaska and coastal. So the extremities are not so extreme as it is as you get more interior and more north. But like, a lot of people move to Alaska with this like idea of this like last frontier, and I'm gonna like do it myself and make it happen on my own. And it's not impossible to do that. But I think where people maybe aren't quite prepared for Alaska is everything is a little bit harder. Like, the winters are a little bit longer and they're a little bit darker, and it takes a little bit longer to get to where you want to go. Sometimes a lot of longer. And I think that is some of the challenge and the joy of living in Alaska, because it builds you into enduring a little bit more, and having to work a little bit harder at everything that you do, and that can build a lot of character. It can keep the population down a little bit. So I enjoy not being able to see my neighbors, and I think a lot of people crave that kind of independence and that space and being able to be close to nature. Yeah, we don't have many ticks up here. Ticks are coming up. We don't have any snakes here.
We do have mosquitoes. We do have a lot of the dangerous things, I would say, are really big.
And obvious, like a bear,
moose and bear. Yeah.
I would say that I don't know how it is where you are, but I would say moose are more dangerous than bear. I think that's maybe a misperception.
Definitely.
Because you'll run into them in your car. They are more aggressive and more territorial of their young, and you run into them more. Whereas bears kind of want to stay and do their own thing. I have been threatened by moose many more times than I've been threatened by bears. Yeah, but you also learn how to interact with them in a way that allows them to be themselves and you to be yourself, right? So if there's a moose charging you, my kids have known since they've been 2 years old that you get behind a tree or behind a car, because the moose can't like chase you like this. And you learn that you maybe don't climb a tree away from a bear. You make noise as you're going through the woods so they know that you're coming. And it's like a mutual respect that you have between yourself and nature.
We also have some Indigenous practice around how we talk to them. So I'm Athabascan. I'm Kaikon, Yukon, Athabascan, and I'm of a bear clan. And in our clan, we don't generally say that word. We'll say a big animal. We'll talk around it, because we believe if you talk about them, you're calling them to you. And so until you're past like having your children, you don't even say the B word. We call them big animals or other animals, because we don't want to bring them in. I don't generally, in our clan, we don't usually eat bear until, we're past having all of our children. So it's something that I can enjoy. So are there any other questions? I'll take our cues from our hosts. We're happy to stand and answer them. And if not, I'll let Taylor. Do you still have it, Taylor?
Yep, I do. I got it right here. Oop. There we go. Well, thank you guys all for joining us this evening. This program is part of the American Center for Moscow's weekly speaker series, continuing through 2026, the 50 states. We invite you to join us next week, Wednesday, April 1st at 8 p.m. Moscow time for the next event in the series, which will be the state of California.
So, Qyana Dailuchi, Buchji, Qyanaqfa, До свидания.
Spasiba.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Thank you so much.